I'm going to show you how to look up action IDs via the Orchestrator REST API. Let's get started. Hi everyone, I'm Watrous from VVork. If this is your first time here and you want to learn about automating, programming, and monitoring in VMware environments, you're in the right place. In the previous video, we saw two different REST requests that allowed us to look up information about actions. The first REST request allowed us to get a bit of information about all the actions, and the second request allowed us to see more detailed information about one action. In this video, what we're going to be taking a look at is alternate ways of looking up action IDs. Let's go do that in the lab environment. Remember in the previous video when we took a look at the get all actions REST request and how I showed you the test tab and how the code here was saving information about the first action in our Orchestrator server. Specifically, it was saving the ID of that first action in this Postman variable called action_ID. Let's go look at our Postman variables. So here we see all the different Postman variables that I've set up. What I want you to see in order to understand what we're going to talk about here is just a handful of these variables. So I have a variable called action_name, another called action_FQN, and the one that we've seen before called action_ID. So the goal in what we're doing in this video is to use some different techniques for looking up action IDs. In the previous video, we saw that you could do a REST request to get information about all of the actions, and then you could iterate through that response body to pick out the ID of the one action that you're interested in. But I want to make this easy for myself. I don't want to have to always write code to go through all 615 actions and find the ID of the one action I'm interested in. I'd rather be able to say, hey, give me information about the action, give me that ID specifically about the action called say hello, or give me the action ID of the action whose FQN is info.vivork.examples.say hello. So again, rather than having to write code to go through the entire response body every single time, I'd rather just say, here's the name of the action I want, or here's the FQN of the action I want. So what we're going to do here in our first REST request is we're going to set a value for this variable called action_name. And to really prove to you that what we're about to do is working, I'm going to get rid of this action ID. There's no ID, no action ID in this Postman variable. But what we're going to do is we're going to put in a name of an action. We could put in say hello, we could put in log result, we could put in the name of any action that we want. I'm going to put in the name log result. That's that SNMP action that we saw in the previous video. So let's click save. Always remember to save. And let's go over to take a look at get action ID by action name. The endpoint URL that we're using here is the exact same endpoint URL that we use to get information about all of the actions. What's different here in this case is the code in the test tab. In the previous video, I showed you code that just arbitrarily returned or stored the action ID of the first action. This code is going to go find the ID of whichever action we specify. In this case, we're going to specify by name. So how does this work? So it takes the response body, parses up that response body. The response body is in JSON. So let's parse that up, stick it in a variable called data. Then we take a look at how many actions there are. So this variable called total actions stores the total number of actions. In my case, that's about 615 different actions. Let's look at some more code here. So it just does a bunch of console.infos to put information into the console log. If you want to see the messages, click here on console. But what's it doing? Ultimately, what this code is doing in this for loop is it's looping through the entire response body. Now, to be really clear here, in this code, the counter variable called I is not the same as it was in the previous video. In the previous video, we were using the I counter variable to loop through one action's attributes. That's not what we're doing here. This time, I is a counter variable that's going to enable us to iterate through all of the actions. So as we go through this while loop, what we're doing is taking a look to see if we can find the action that we're currently looking at and whether that action has the same name as we specified in the Postman variable called action_name. And that's what's happening down here on line 29. If we see that the name of the action that we're currently looking at in the in the response body, if that name in the response body matches the action that we're looking for, again, we specified that through the Postman variable called action_name, then let's break out of this loop and we will scroll down a little bit. We will actually ultimately store the action ID that we found into the Postman variable called action_ID. Now, that's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but essentially what this code is doing is it's going through the entire response body, looking for the action in that response body that matches the action name that we specified in the Postman variable called action_name. Whew. Again, big mouthful. Let's just run it. Let's click send. And as you can see, we got back a status code 200. That's good. That always makes me happy. We're going to resize this here. Again, what you see here might surprise you. The response body, as we can see from the size, has all 615 actions. The point of this REST request is not to get back information just about that one action that we said we were looking for. This REST request gets information about all of the actions. This response body has information about all the actions. We're not trying to change that. What we're trying to do in the test tab code is to save the action ID for the action we're looking for into the Postman variable called action_ID. So let's see if that happened. Just before I show this, remember a few moments ago, I deleted the value of action_ID. But let's go look at our variables again, and let's go find action ID, and notice that action ID has a action ID in it. And specifically, that's the action ID for the action called log result. If you want to prove this to yourself, again, maybe memorize some of this ID here. If you really want to prove this to yourself, you can go log into Orchestrator. And in Orchestrator, if we go to Actions, and what's that one called? It's called Log Result. If we take a look at the Log Result action and open it up, here is, well, at least here is a portion of the ID. If you want to see the entire ID, that's up here. But if we really wanted to be super duper careful here, we could compare the two IDs. But trust me here, the action ID that we just saw in Postman matches this ID. To prove to you that this is working, why don't we change the name of the action that we're looking for? Let's change it to say hello. Don't forget to save. And let's go run the REST request again. If we send the request again, you'll notice that this time when we go look at the action_ID variable, Postman variable, you'll notice that the ID has changed. And again, to really prove this to you, if we go look at the action called say hello, you'll notice that say hello's action ID ends in Charlie Bravo Echo 6, and Postman has Charlie Bravo Echo 6 as the action ID. So hopefully that proves to you that this REST request works. Now that you understand how that request works, let's take a look at our next REST request. This works essentially the same way. The point of this REST request is once again to go look at all the actions and find just one action and just find the action ID for that action. But this time, instead of specifying the name of the action that we're looking for, we're going to tell it the FQN of the action that we're looking for. So let's see how this works. So if we go over to our Postman variables, again, the last REST request worked by setting up this Postman variable called action name. This time we're going to use action_FQN, and we're going to set it to the full name of the action. Again, the action's name is say hello, and all this stuff in front of it is the module, the action module path. So let's click save, and we're going to go run get action ID by action. Again, clicking send. We get back a response. Again, this response body has information about all the actions, but the test code that I've written here is going through that entire response body, looking potentially at all 615 different actions and finding the one action that has a matching FQN. Now, if you haven't already caught this, looking up actions by their FQN is a much more surefire way of finding the exact action that you're looking for. What do I mean? Well, think about the two actions we've been looking up. One of the actions was called say hello. There's only one say hello. It's a goofy action that I wrote. There's only one say hello action in my Orchestrator server. But what about that other action called log result? It turns out there is only one action called log result, but I could imagine situations where we're looking up an action called log result, and there could potentially be 5 instances of actions with that same name, or 10 or 20 or however many. Names of actions can be duplicated in your Orchestrator server, but FQNs have to be unique. So if you want to make certain that when you're looking up an action to get its action ID or any other information about that action, you're going to find it generally safer to look up by FQN. If you look up by action name instead, you may get back multiple actions, and you're going to have to write some more code to figure out which of those ones that you want. Join me in the next video as we continue to explore the Orchestrator REST API.